There was a time when Christmas in Britain was not a big deal at all. It was even banned in Puritan days, and by the time of the beginning of the 19th century it had dwindled into a minor occasion. Then in 1843 Charles Dickens published A Christmas Carol. He wanted to make the story that spoke to a lot of people, and he took Scrooge, who embodied so many ills of the age, into one of the most hopeful stories ever, along with the way he reinvented Christmas, and it's been like that with us ever since. These days, it's a lot more than a religious festival. It's the time of intense commercial activity, and this puts a great deal of financial and emotional strain on many families. Young children are targeted on TV with adverts for toys, electronic games and the tablet computers, and all the food outlets have increased the pressure to buy their Christmas goods: turkeys, confectionery, wine, beer, spirits, chocolates, and on the list goes. For most families, whilst this is an expensive time, they can cope with it once a year. However, there are those who are unable to cope. From the start of the last century, various charities and their supporters have been providing Christmas food and other essentials to what used to be termed the needy. Back in 1950s, and as a young boy and a member of the 5th Douglas Scouts, on Christmas Day I used to deliver dinners from a hay box on my bicycle, mainly to elderly people. The food was donated by the shops and then cooked in the ovens of Quirk's Bakery, which was then in Back Strand Street. In recent years, the residents of a number of the Douglas Corporation estates have banded together to make Christmas food hampers or boxes in support of their neighbours who need a little help. Well, today many of the island's churches offer seasonal meals, and the Salvation Army provide a free meal on Boxing Day. Also pitching into this is the Isle of Man Foodbank. They've launched a Christmas appeal asking the public to help those less well off. Now, the definition of a food bank, or the dictionary definition that is a non-profit charitable organisation that distributes food to those who have difficulty in purchasing enough food to avoid hunger. The first was established in the United States in 1967, and since then many thousands have been set up all over the world. In Europe, which had until recently had little need for food banks due to the extensive welfare systems, their numbers grew rapidly after the global increase in the price of food, which began in the late 2006, and especially after the financial crises of 2007 and 8 began to worsen the economic conditions for those on low income. Now, the Isle of Man Foodbank was set up in 2013, when it issued that year 150 food parcels, and this year they say it will exceed 800, maybe to 1,000, and these are issued throughout the year, not just Christmas. Now, in our prosperous and caring society, why is such support necessary? Who uses a food bank and why? What does it offer? How does it operate and who runs it? And where does the food come from? Well, with me to answer these questions and to tell more about the work of the Isle of Man Foodbank, we welcome our studio guests. They are the Director of the Bank, Neal Mellon, the Operations Section Manager of Marks & Spencer, Lee Giles, and the Community Rehabilitation and Family Court Welfare Officer in the Probation Service, Geraldine Martin. Well, to all of you, thank you for giving up your time today to join us. I thought at one time the weather was going to beat us, but we're all managed to get here today.
Indeed.
Right. Well, Neal, could I go to you first of all, as you are I said introduce you as Director of the Food Bank. I mean, you have a board of directors, I presume, but does this mean you're the Managing Director, as it were?
I'm the Operational Director. We have 3 directors. David Gaughan, myself and Jane Foxton.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always on the lookout for additional talented individuals who'd like to come on board.
Right. Now, how was it formed? I mean, 4 years ago, as I understand it, a number of local charities and faith organisations. So why did it come together? What's the reason?
From my point of view, I'd started the ball rolling in my area, looking at the subject of food banks as a possible community activity for our Rotary branch to be involved in. So we were looking at it just from a very localised perspective. I started to research the need for that a year and a half before we actually went live. And I expected to find that the island didn't need a food bank. In actual fact, it was totally the reverse. It was an eye-opener. And over that year and a half, as I gathered more information, various groups and individuals on island asked to come and sit in some of our meetings just to find out what we were looking at, what we were thinking of doing, and it grew from there.
Right.
There was a coming together of various groups, and we decided we didn't want to reinvent the wheel if we launched a food bank. So we brought in some key team members, if you like, and that was the Salvation Army. They have a history of working with and feeding the hungry and the impoverished. Isle of Man Housing Matters. They're the charity for the homeless on Ireland. The Department of Social Care, as it was at the time, because we thought that department would be able to identify people that would be in need of help. And also the Department of Fair Trading, which might sound like a strange bedfellow, but within that division there is the debt management group, and we use them extensively.
So it's not just food that you're spreading the service over a lot of different needs, or perhaps the causes of people being homeless or without food.
Absolutely. It's good to be involved in distributing food, and you've mentioned different agencies who have been involved in it. But what we do is take it further. We work with clients who need help. We work with them to identify what factors have pushed them over the edge and into requiring help, and then we produce an action plan that they'll work on to help resolve that. And in the interim, we use the food as a bridge through to back into independence.
Now, when it comes to the food, what do you provide?
We provide a massive range of food. When we started off, we thought we were very clever. We started with a box. We had researched what other food banks were doing. And so we had a mixture of ambient temperature goods. So these are goods that are either dried or tinned. We stayed away from perishable foodstuffs, as most other food banks did. And we had the box assessed at Nobles to make sure it was nutritionally viable. And it was. So we thought we were very clever. But over the following 12 months, as if you like, we got down and dirty with our clients and really worked closely with people, we realised very quickly that one box doesn't fit all. Our box worked if our clients had access to pots and pans and cookers and had a kitchen available to them. But as we worked closer with everybody, we began to realise many of our clients didn't have suitable catering facilities. Some only had access to microwaves. And for others, their only access to any KitchenAid was a kettle. So we ended up with a box of what we labelled, perhaps wrongly then because it stuck, but kettle food for kettle people. As time went on, we then tailored those boxes to meet other needs. So if people have food allergies, if they're gluten-free or dairy-free, we make sure we can provide for that. We provide boxes for vegans and vegetarians. So it's quite versatile.
Well, there's all of these various things, but you've produced then three emotive words there: homelessness, impoverished, and hungry.
Yes.
Do they run together, or are they automatically running side by side? That or not?
They all run together. They're all intermingled. The issue of
but they're not all homeless, obviously.
No, not by any means. The issue of managing hunger is very complex, and the causes for people going hungry is equally complex.
But how do you define hunger? Because it's not just I'm hungry, I've missed a meal, is it? We're talking about not enough food over a long period of time, or at least significant period of time.
Yes, clients are referred from a vast range of sources, and some will self-refer, and we've met people who have been hungry for significant periods and have started to show signs of significant weight loss. But the issue around why they're hungry, as I said, is very complex. So that could be anything that causes a reduction in income into the house. We are not just working with people who are on benefits. We work with people who are in employment. Hunger in employment is becoming a bigger issue.
What's that cause of that? Is that because the low wages?
It's a reflection of fairly static wages over a long period of time. It's a reflection of increased costs of living. Certainly over the last 12 months, we've seen a fairly major rise in grocery prices on Ireland. It can be to do with sudden changes in work situations, breakdown in relationships. There's a vast range. Even things such as the start of the new school term in September, there's a big pressure on families getting in school uniforms that fit, and people are left asking the question, do I get the school uniform for the children or do I put food on the table? And also there's the issue of, do I heat or do I eat?
Right. Well, maybe we can come back to how some of the aspects of the food bank works first of all, but the word in there is food in your title. Where do you get the food from that you distribute?
Well, the majority of the food that we get comes from the Manx public. They've always been our greatest supporters. We've just recently finished the 3-day pre-Christmas collection we do each year. That's held at Tesco, and I'm really pleased to say that we had over 200 trays of produce donated to the island. So these are the large green trays you'll see on supermarket shelves.
So people, when they're getting their groceries, get an extra item and put it in there.
Go and get not just an extra item. For some, it's an extra item. For some people, they come up and they'll push a trolley towards us, take off the top layer perhaps, or one or two items, and give the rest to us.
But as far as the getting the food, that's public donating the food.
Yes.
But you have all sorts of other food, because I see that many of the supermarkets these days and other similar organisations are getting food to you.
Yes, indeed. All the major food suppliers on island are involved with the food bank, or most of them. We work very closely with Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's and the Cooperative,
Right.
and Tinwald Mills, Top Banana, Robinson's. There's a vast range.
Well, that's the different types of company there for Tinwald Mills in Eden Park. What would you get from them?
We get what we call posh food, and that introduces an interesting element to the food bank. But we'll get food that has reached its best before date.
Right.
It's still suitable for use. It's just whether or not the quality of the food changes dramatically after that period. So we would get anything from pickled cactus to truffle-infused olive oil. It's a massive range of top-end
So
produce.
how do you decide then what you put in the boxes? Because somebody might get one of those at home and think, what's this?
What happened in practice and over a period of time was we would put the best before produce to one side. We would fill a box for individuals as we would do normally, and then offer them their choice of produce from that pile of posh food. In practice, a lot of people would say to me, "Mister, what do I do with truffle-infused olive oil? And what am I going to do with a pickled cactus? Can I not just have meat and potato and vegetables? That's really what I'm after." So I talked to the management team at Tinwald Mills, and they agreed that we could effectively run a pop-up supermarket with this produce, and we do that in schools and church halls. We make the food available. We take donations. We don't sell it. We'll take donations for those goods. That gives somebody a really good bargain. We get the money that we need. We use that during the year to supplement the food bank, usually with things like long life milk, cereals, etc.
So you're getting the stuff that comes through from these places. You mentioned ShopRite and Tesco and others. This is now goods in the main then that has reached a particular date.
It's reached either best before date or it's chill by date.
Okay, right. Now, one of your suppliers is Marks and Spencer's.
Yes.
Right. And sitting with us today is Lee Giles, who's Marks and Spencer's Operations Section Manager. Well, I see that you've broken the mould, Lee, by starting to supply uncooked meat.
We have, yeah. We've started to supply chilled produce to Neal and the food bank. We looked back a couple of months ago and seen that there was an opportunity that we could progress with what we could give to the food bank, a higher protein products. We sat down with Neal, who was very helpful with us, and we decided that the best time would be just before Christmas to launch this, to go into. It's not mainly meat products, it's milks, butters, ready meals, anything toward that day is going out of date. So it's never out of date when we give it to Neal. It's always in date. It just gives a much broader selection of produce that we can actually donate to Neal in the food bank.
If you didn't do this, what would happen to it?
It would go off the island for recycling or
Be scrapped effectively.
yeah, basically. And I think we found that a lot of the food that we do donate to Neal now isn't actually going out of date food. It can be damaged food due to transportation. It can be food that may not be totally saleable on the floor with a ripped packet, or a slight corner could be damaged. And
So goods that you would consider unsaleable, but they're still...
not 100% packaging wise, because we can get them off to Neal as well. So
This is extremely good for Neal's organisation, but Marks and Spencer's doesn't see it as a means of diluting its revenue then?
No. Marks and Spencer's as a whole, we've brought in a scheme. We've had it for a number of years now. It's called Plan A, and it's to look at all of operations and how we can reduce our footprint, not just on the island, but throughout the whole of the business. We recycle all our cardboard, all our plastics. So Marks and Spencer's as a whole, as a company, are committed to donate a lot of time and effort into making sure that we get something like this right, and that we can help the communities.
There must be some, when I say cost, I don't just mean cost in the items you haven't sold, but there must be some administrative cost as this as well, because food like this would have to be collected from you. I suppose you have to make an inventory of it in some way, I would think on a daily basis, wouldn't it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we're very lucky, especially on the island. I've got a fantastic team that work with me. I've got two other section managers who are excellent. They kind of pick up the slack where we're off trying to sort out Foodbank's items, and so as a company, it's really important to us that we get this right and that we can actually help.
So you're fairly satisfied it's an ongoing thing?
Oh yes,
Yes, not just sort of a Christmas present.
No, we're hoping to continue this on and grow it further and
So
further.
what sort of volume of meat, roughly, are we talking about? When I say meat or whatever, but food, but we started off by talking about meat. Well, what are we talking about? A large amount, or just a few chops, or what?
We're talking about generally a tray of meat a day, give or take a few items.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's not just the meat that's the real important stuff. I mean, we've always donated bakery goods, breads, which is fantastic, and Neal's always really happy to take them. But now we can donate butter to go with the bread. Right. So we've got we can actually have combination of products now that we can actually get.
Oh, so when they leave Marks and Spencer's, Neal, do you have the facilities, the fridges, deep freezers to take things good?
Yes, we do, thank you. Earlier this year, we started our planning for this project in July, and as part of that, we realised we'd need to have a bank of freezers and a fridge. So we had already been fundraising. We have some very supportive fundraisers who would like to buy specific products, and we also use money from the pop-up supermarket to fund 4 freezers and a chest freezer, and we also have a fridge. The problem wasn't in getting the devices. The problem was trying to find somewhere to store it. One of the challenges.
You don't have any premises of your own then?
We don't. We're often referred to as a nebulous charity. We cover the entire island. We deliver food from anywhere from Craignish to Lamb's Hill, from Douglas Head to over to Peel.
So
but we don't have a.
Where do you keep this food?
We have a central store outside of Douglas, which can become a challenge at times. We have outlets, so we store food at Housing Matters Isle of Man, and they assess a lot of our clients for us and will distribute from there.
So where are the fridges now? Where do you keep them?
Geraldine very graciously allowed us to store them up at Tremode House, which is great, and that was based on our ongoing relationship on a number of projects.
Tremode House or the drill hall, Geraldine?
Remote house.
Yes, well-
So that's the probation office now. And the upstairs and part of the lower ground floor are not in use at this moment in time. They will become the accommodation for offenders eventually, but at the moment they're standing empty. And Neal and I started working together some time ago now, looking really to try to address shoplifting issues on the island. And obviously the probation service will either prepare social inquiry reports for the courts in relation to those offences or supervise those offenders who've committed those offences. So we were looking to do something innovative in terms of addressing the shoplifting issues on the island. And as part of that, and I think it's fair to say that we're both quite good when it comes to ideas, and we very often have 5 or 10 minutes that stretches into maybe an hour and a half, where we have various discussions around solving some of the issues on the island. And Neal came to me and said, the empty part of your building, can we use some of it to store the fridge and freezers for the Foodbank project? So it was standing there doing nothing, so it seemed the right thing to do.
Right, so they store there. So somebody collects them off your team from Marks and Spencer's.
Yes.
Takes them to Tremode.
Yes.
Then what do you do with it?
It goes into the freezer. What's freezable? Any items that aren't suitable for freezing, we'll get out that evening to families locally. And then from there we will distribute it through outlets such as the Housing Matters, where we put in a new double freezer.
Right. Now, you indicated earlier on that one of the problems seemed to be that people who were in receipt of this food, for whatever the reason, some of them couldn't or didn't know how to cook it.
Yes, that's right. I work with a lot of families and individuals who don't have cookery skills and who struggle because of either having insufficient equipment or no equipment to cook with. So that takes us into 2 other projects that are running.
Well, can I come to the other projects in a minute with you, Neal, because we've got plenty of time to explore this, but I'm curious to know what you do with the meat, because, you can't keep it in the freezer forever and keep adding to it each week. So what
No, quite right. The meat now will go out in parcels to families and individuals,
Right, okay.
primarily through Housing Matters.
Now, when I briefly spoke to you before programme, Geraldine, you talked about some of it going up to the prison.
That is the plan, yes. So eventually what we'll be doing is taking some of that meat up there, and it will be defrosted and cooked in the prison by prisoners and by staff. That will be alongside things like qualifications in basic food hygiene, nutrition, budgeting, and obviously cookery skills. And then we'll put it into portions, refreeze, and send back to the freezers again, so it can be distributed in portions rather than as a huge joint of meat, which some people will not have the ability to cook or may not have an oven, as Neal has said.
So when they come back to them, forgive me, did I understand it properly? It's either fully cooked or partly cooked?
It will be cooked and just need to be warmed up.
Right, and that's perfectly safe, is it? In that
Absolutely.
instance?
We, as I say, basic food hygiene is part of the qualification, and we're very mindful that whatever we do, we have to transport appropriately, freeze again, etc., etc.
This must provide quite a bit of work for the prison.
It does provide some work for the prison, yeah. They are occupied in other ways as well, but it does put prisoners into the prison, into the kitchens there, and gives them something to do.
Is it volunteers, or is it just part of your turn next?
It's still volunteered, but we do look for people with those specific skills as well. So if we've had people who've worked in restaurants previously, we would match them to that particular skill. If we've got somebody who has previously worked in gardening, for example, they may be working in the polytunnels at the prison. So we do try to match the skill set with the individuals.
But if they do this for a period of time, I presume they're working, I think you said, with the actual kitchen staff themselves.
Yeah.
But that's just the labour factor of it. Do they adhere any skills? Do they pick up any skills? Do they get any qualifications out of it?
Well, that's right. What we're doing is working with the education department within the prisons. So there will be qualifications, as I said, in basic food hygiene, in budgeting, in healthy eating, and in basic cookery skills. So they should come away with a range of qualifications that should help them get employment once they're discharged from prison.
Yes. So they're quite happy. This is going to be an ongoing thing then from now on as well,
Absolutely,
because the
yes,
supply is ongoing.
Yes.
And the demand is ongoing.
Yes, indeed.
And we do average a fair few prisoners at Derby, so we think that we'll be able to keep the production line going from that point of view.
When we talked just earlier on about people on probation, people of shoplifting, for instance, and is there a lot of shoplifting, Neal? Lee, I mean, do you have a lot of people nicking stuff from Marks and Spencer's? Particularly food.
It's mainly food. Yeah, mainly food. I think we have our fair share. I think we do. Yeah, we do. We have a security at in-store security guard. He's part of the street watch.
Mm-hmm.
He goes to the street watch meetings. But yeah, I think there is generally up and down.
Would you describe? I'm not trying to put words into your mouth, but would you describe it as a problem?
Not so much for us as a problem, because we deal with it ongoingly. If we didn't deal with it, then it would be a problem for us.
Right. Shoplifting doesn't seem to me something that would necessarily come into the probation service. It was something at a lower level, isn't it, of our legal system?
It can be at a lower level, and it can quite often be combined with other issues. So it may be that the shoplifting has escalated because there's a drug problem, for example. So it depends, but yes, it could be that the probation service come across the offender because we're actually got probation officers in court, and so where there's a successful prosecution of somebody shoplifting, a probation officer may make a recommendation to the court directly about what the court might want to do in terms of the sentence of that individual. It wouldn't necessarily be put onto a probation order for shoplifting unless there was some other, what we would describe as criminogenic factors.
And if you find somebody who is coming into you, they have to see you, and you find out they have a problem, can you do anything about it then? Do you refer them to Neal's organisation, or can you actually I think one of the pieces of literature I saw said you do have some supplies actually in your offices.
We do indeed. So we want to try and avoid the problem. And obviously many of our offenders are on benefits, so they're on limited incomes. They're offenders because they make wrong choices, and that isn't necessarily about their offending behaviour. That can also be about, maybe buying an expensive takeaway rather than trying to make the budget last all week, buying basic provisions from a supermarket. So we try to work with our offenders in a number of ways. And if we need to refer them, so it could be that we would refer them to Neal, but as you rightly said, we also have our own Foodbank store, so we're able to give provisions from there. And then other referrals may be in terms of drug or alcohol needs, so we could refer them to the drug and alcohol team, for example.
Is there any age bracket for this? Does this go right across the ages, Neal?
It goes right across. We can work with families with newborn all the way through to people in their 80s and 90s.
And in most instances, we hear these various words. I wasn't reading your literature, but I was reading some literature from food banks in other countries, and they kept referring to desperation and depression.
Yes, some of the charities see major issues with people with various types of mental illnesses. I see hopelessness and despondency sometimes when I'm working with people.
Well, are the circumstances then in the Isle of Man that much different to the UK and Southern Ireland?
No, I don't think the trigger factors are any different. I think what's different is the way we approach them and the way that we try and work with our clients to get back to being independent. Most of the people that access the food bank on the island only require between 4 and 6 food parcels, and then within that time frame they've resolved the problems that tipped them over the edge, and they're back to standing on their own
Right,
feet.
well, the Church of England Urban Fund, which is yet another organisation interested in this, their social action charity says that in the United Kingdom, 1 million Britons use food banks. That seems an incredibly high figure. What would you say the sort of percentage here is then?
Massive. I've not translated it into a percentage across the island, so that's something to go away and
But
think
in
about. But in
numbers?
terms of numbers, our numbers have been going up year on year. As you said, in our first year, we put out 125 food parcels. In year 2, that doubled to 250. Year 3, it was 550. And this year, in excess of 800.
Now, I know this is a strange question, Geraldine, but do people very often who end up in problems, whether it's shoplifting or whatever some of the other issues are, is this often down to they're just awkward people, or there's a social issue here, or there's an issue of education here, or they're isolated from the rest of normal society?
I think it's unusual to see somebody before us in the probation service, or the prison service for that matter, who has not had any issues in their life. They've come from a middle or upper class family and have lived the life of relative luxury. It tends to be people who come from difficult backgrounds, and that can be a range of things. So it can be that they perhaps don't have both mum and dad available to them as children. It could be that they drop out of education. It could be that the parents aren't necessarily interested in supporting their children through education. So those tend to be the types of things and the start of something going wrong. So it can be about deprivation, but it can also be about not having the correct parenting skills in the first place.
Right. Well, that Church of England report that I mentioned a second ago, it says as a tagline, those affected don't just go hungry or poorly nourished, they suffer isolation, are excluded from participating in social activities, and experience considerable anxiety.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's a spin-off to this then. Neal, when people have been through your assistance and they look as if they're back on track again, what sort of difference do you see in them? Are they a different person going out your door than coming in?
Over the years, I've had individuals and families making contact and saying thank you, and thank you for the difference that you helped make. I'm always surprised at the feedback that I get from different individuals, but one mother was telling me recently that her teenage son had gone out to buy himself his birthday present with what money they were able to put together for that. Instead of coming back with what she was expecting, he came back with a jacket and said, look, Mum, this is what I've got because that's what I need. And she felt that that was down to him witnessing the family getting support from the food bank and looking at how they changed their decision making. But Roger, can I just come in with one thing? You talked about these people, are they removed from normal society? They're very much part of normal society. We don't know who is going to be next. I have worked with people who ended up struggling because of a bereavement. I've ended up with people who have gone into problems because of poor decision making, as Geraldine refers to. But also I've worked with 2 different families who have lived the lifestyle of millionaires, who have woken up and the companies have gone bust, they have debts, and they're in the same situation as anyone else who knocks at the door and asks for help.
So quite a mix then.
Absolutely.
Well, look, at this point in our conversation, it's time now for us to take a short commercial break. In this edition of Sunday Opinion, we're featuring the work of the Isle of Man Foodbank, and it had recently its Christmas appeal. Our studio guests are Director of the bank, Neal Mellon, from the Probation Service, Geraldine Martin, and the Operations Section Manager of Marks and Spencer's, Lee Giles. Now, we were talking about sort of the more obvious aspects of people turning up and in need of help and getting a parcel, as you call it, of food. And also you said that you referred them to other government agencies and other charitable agencies in order to help them perhaps solve the problem that perhaps even caused the thing in the first place. But how do they come to you in the first place? I mean, how do they go about contacting you? And do you vet them? Or because there's always a worry that you might end up by servicing people who are, I suppose, on the scrounge.
Yes, that's a concern to a lot of people and donors who ask how their money's being used or how their donation of food's used. Um, Anyone can contact us on the Foodbank phone, which is 311 550, or email us if they have access to that. But for most people, they're either self-refer or they'll be referred by various government agencies. So they could be referred, for example, from probation, from police, from courts, certainly from education, from healthcare workers. But equally, families often recommend the food bank to family members or other members, and employers will mention it to employees that they witness struggling.
Yeah, so we'll come back at the end, near the end of the programme once more, and how they can contact you. But you said very briefly before that you were developing other schemes. What are they?
We have a number of projects on the go, Roger. We like to plan our projects or our research, implement them slowly, and just test them to make sure it's appropriate, whether or not to continue then into the next year. But for example, we mentioned the slow cookers. Last year, just after Christmas, we had a very kind donation of 10 slow cookers, which we introduced to different families in the community. And the feedback from that was primarily that the food that we gave them went further, lasted longer. The family could cook large batches of food, eat half and freeze half. The quality of the food that was produced was better. The kids and partners would say, our food just tastes so much better. But the most important thing was the fact that fuel bills were driven down. These are a very economical way of cooking. But I'd also witnessed that people have been missing out. I think there's a whole generation out there in the public who've missed out on years of home economics in schools, or perhaps through poor parenting or for whatever reason, they're not skilled at cooking well. So this year we've taken those two things forwards. We had been doing some one-to-one training with individual families, saw the benefit from that. So we have introduced a programme which will be delivered initially up at the University College of Man, where we'll train people in basic kitchen skills, food skills. And as part of that, when they complete the course, they'll go off with a new slow cooker. We currently have been donated 38 slow cookers from dream catchers, yes, and then another 30 from 2 individuals. So we've got a lot to put out there.
And these are looked after. Do they stay with the family afterwards, or are they just on loan to them?
No, they're a gift to the family. It is the family's. I have asked each family in turn if they find they don't benefit from it or they don't want it, not sell it, to give it back to me so I can use it elsewhere, and to let me know quarterly what's happening with your fuel bills. This is where we have the evidence.
Now, you mentioned Robinsons and getting apples, and they're giving you a regular donation, and cheese from the creamery and these
That's
sort of
right.
things as well.
We started getting cheese from the creamery on a monthly basis. In the last year, just after Christmas, we started that programme, and that was really appreciated because that was a really good source of protein, and became our main source of good quality protein in the food chain.
Now, if you had vegetables from somebody like Robinson's, what about growing their own vegetables? Going back to almost the wartime days, digging. Do you encourage people to do this? Do they have something in the back garden they can do with?
Well, we do encourage fresh food being put into the food bank chain. So to that end, 3 years ago, we started an allotment up at Braid, and that's working. Well, that's developing, I should say. That it hit a hiatus when I went off for heart surgery, and it was maintained by volunteers, but sadly those volunteers have left the island for different reasons. That allotment now has been maintained and developed and utilised again by the University College of Man. Their horticulture department is maintaining it for us. Their students will use that site to complete their practical projects, I end up with a well-maintained allotment, and the produce goes into the food chain.
Now, we don't have a great deal of time left on our programme now, and a couple of other topics which really we should have got round to, but one of them, of course, is you talked about hunger in children. No food, especially at holiday time.
Yes, there's two things that we see in relation to children. We have seen this year particularly an increase in holiday hunger. So our figures for providing food increased dramatically in August and September of this year. And we're expecting to see an increase now during the Christmas holidays. So this is something we're looking at, trying to develop more intelligence about, and looking at how we'll plan to meet that in the future year.
And how do you see, you're just one department or one section of government where you've been working in cooperation with people. There's obviously other government departments, from social care to whatever. I mean, do you see this working relationship, working with a charity or a third sector organisation, is a good thing, or do you think this sort of work really is normally a government operation, isn't it?
I don't think it would be a government operation. I think what we look to do in the probation service is partner agencies where we can either provide support by our community service workers, so men and women subject to community service orders, a lot of hours that we can give to different projects. So, for example, we've been working on the coastal paths just recently. So I think the probation service is slightly different to the other government departments.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, do you see a future in this? Do you think this is going to be a long-term benefit in lots of different ways, by the sound of it?
Well, sadly, yes, because as long as there's that need, then obviously we will be working with the Foodbank charity and other charities, as we do already.
And there's one thing in all of this conversation which I'm not clear about yet, is that why in a prosperous society like ours there is this need?
The factors are just so various, it's enormous. But people can just suddenly go into hit problems with income, and that could be down to a death in the family. That's challenging emotionally, but it's also going to be challenging financially. It can be down to breakups in relationships. It can be down to employment, redundancy, failure for firms to pay out support packages and redundancy. It can be down to poor decision making. There's a raft of problems.
Okay, well look, thank you all. Lee, you're about to leave us now. You have another appointment.
I am, yeah. Back to work.
So that's Lee Giles from Marks & Spencer's Operations Section Manager. And Lee Mellon, who I've just been speaking to from the Foodbank, and Geraldine Martin from the Probation Service, are going to stay with us for a little longer for the Man in Line. Now, but before we do that, Neal, anybody listening today who wishes to contact you to obtain assistance from your service or to help you in any way, how do they go about it? How do they contact you?
We have a dedicated telephone, which is 311 550. Mm-hmm. People can email, and the address for that is the Isle of Man Foodbank @gmail.com. We also have a website people can look at, isleofmanfoodbank.wordpress.com.
Okay, so all of these things, but the telephone number really is its first easy source of contact, is it?
Yes.
Right.
They can also contact one of our major support agents, which is Housing Matters Isle of Man, and that's 675507.
Okay, well, thank you for that.